architecture is not a bit. Okay, just like okay.
Oh, yeah, everything is really short. It's nice to see what people discuss. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's everything, right?
I don't have time to no, but it's not, it's limited now. So, in general, so, but it fits in, of course,
I thought it was just this.
basically just like what you can say, it's critical.
These are not.
But LK, if she wants to try it, but she, I'm sure it's probably she won't have to just check. I'll see you at the college. Yes, I guess you can have this idea. The show is at MIT. The show is MIT. Yeah.
Should I do that? Because
Yes. Where's the other method? Yeah, it's gonna be. Where's the other one? Or whatever it's called.
The other one. That is back to the camera.
Yeah. I think that's why street shoppers, they want to.
Just right on. Yes, but I can also help them with that. Oh, we were just going. We were going.
It's still a bit hot. It's not in a bag, so I brought the whole box.
Sure,
And then this is the situation.
I can't.
Like this situation.
No, it's not.
Sounds lovely. Yeah. That's it.
That's insane, dude. It's longer than anything. It's longer than you.
Yes.
Now.
That's why they're on.
That's what I can. You're just gonna slightly dim the lights, just that.
Oh, really? And I think.
Wait, question. Question.
Oh, yes, we do.
Yeah, so it's normal. Interior wall.
Like.
Well, I like the name thing.
Model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we want to
Yeah. Are you hella cautious about
Were you passionate about it? Right around in Malibu before the rainy season. Theoretically on Monday, but not as heavy. Monday, we're supposed to think is the latest. I mean, I gotta look at it.
And that's why you're going out of business.
But I don't think we're gonna get the pummels or like.
And free income statements.
They break ground on, after November 1st, actually, they don't let
So you're
you
not gonna like
start. Are you serious? Yeah, I'm serious. They'll let you grade, but they won't let you begin grading in the rainy period.
I like that. Yeah,
Layers of, no, so it's like we had to.
Oh, yes, it's like I don't normally do.
Yeah, we did, yeah, so the. Almost all compacted. So it's really, thanks. Amy, I meant to say the Michael project is really cool.
And then I just re-up.
I got some pictures of it too, of his presentation. He did a great presentation. It was like two models, two scales of model. They had a camera on the top, which was, they what?
Just doesn't have any local project.
Weird. St. Matthews.
It's gonna actually work on second. What is it?
It's a hall, it's like a founder, the founder's hall. In Palisades. Yeah, exactly, yeah. It used to be the Quincy Jones one burned down, then Charles.
Wait, like,
the
you can sit there for sure, but like, I'm gonna be like.
relatively new, I mean, fucking decades ago.
40 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I am.
It's great.
Really?
Got a beautiful-
Really, Indigo?
Oh, so we.
That's how we are? No, I understand, no, it's like that. I get it. Oh, okay.
I'm gonna have to work on your second.
Right, you don't need them. I'm gonna. Okay. She don't rock me that.
No, I was like, I didn't wanna go through you guys.
Yeah.
And then you said it.
Okay.
Sorry, we're gonna have to be. Wait, can I just plug in real quick? Before like it's. Or also with this before.
Oh, yeah.
I put mine in red so they can't not see it.
I don't know the answer.
Oh my god, you're like, but this is.
Yes, it does.
Wait, let me see that.
No, I mean, it's starting again.
This is.
Oh, where is it? Uh-oh. I'm gonna. Uh-oh. No, I'm gonna, no, I'm touching stuff. It's like gross down there. Here I am. Tell me where the. Damn it. Oh,
Okay, sorry.
I always say that.
And then I'll.
I don't even want to go like. I'll start setting.
Okay.
Wait, we're in the.
So,
German.
Like, there's a white shirt.
It's like, no idea, like.
Actually, I don't know what you have.
It's like.
You, wait.
Wait, what?
You started, it's your last.
No, it's like-
You totally tried. I was like. Anyways.
Oh, I'm already.
You're totally good.
Let's see what was. And there was.
I asked him. I'm freaking out. I'm all, okay. Oh my god, I'm freaking out.
You're less than like so many people.
Yeah. Really? Oh.
Yeah, I was kicked out.
Oh, yeah.
I saw it like from people.
Hey, just like, you don't have.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why.
How you.
Well, that's why.
Which was, I know. Yeah.
So that. It's like a wine. Laura was.
Funny, because you know what I mean?
I just bought it and I want to so I was like, wait, I'm like, I was just back up.
I go to.
Why the hell do you record this?
Yeah.
How you
Oh, come on, crazy. Okay, so I
Even more. Okay, you.
Well, I left.
I don't know. You want to do some other pictures?
I will wait. Yeah.
I think it's great. What was your like technical that's like materials did you take a
Yes, yes.
You had to take a photo.
You can check.
One of the problems with one of the real problems.
I like soft air.
Right. Whereas class, where there's mainly myself, you don't.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not on the full course base, but on the individual. That's what's
You know what, my parents, like, I'm good, right? My mom's friends. Because my aunt. Well, it's not. It's so bad. Was so like.
I've seen your.
Yeah, my aunt. Like so like.
Thank you for reaching out. I don't. It's wild.
Well, not so proud. That was that.
You see something.
I mean, I.
They get more familiar. They're all kind of average, like we're sort of.
This murder.
Wrinkles, hair braids, everything. This color is always.
Well, I was gonna say.
Hello. Hello. Can you guys hear me? Okay, yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kate Chu. I'm a lecturer here at the USC School of Architecture. I'm thrilled to be introducing our distinguished guest, Kundoo, today alongside Jia Gu, who is Assistant Professor of Architecture at Harvey Mudd College. First, a little bit of context. For the last 3 years, I've had the privilege and joy of collaborating with Jia on Material Acts, a research project that attends to how architectural designers are working with material in ways that confound conventional ideas about nature, labor, and production sites. This research currently exists in the form of an exhibition at Craft Contemporary here in LA, part of the Getty Foundation PST Art Initiative and on view through January 5th. Material Acts has also produced a book, which we're really excited to be celebrating tonight with a book launch at the museum at 6:30. So please join us if you can. And beginning with Anupama's lecture today, Material Acts is a symposium gathering many of the out-of-state and international architects who've contributed to our exhibition and book to share and discuss their important and standard-defying research and building practices with each other. So we're really excited to have Anupama kind of kicking things off. I will let Jia speak a little more about our symposium and to introduce Anupama.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I am coming back from several years. I previously have been part of the design faculty, and it's a pleasure to join the community again and introducing a remarkable cohort of speakers. I first want to also welcome Matthias Kohler, Charlotte Malter-Bartz, Kristen Yogiman, and Ben Loescher, who are all part of our symposium tomorrow. And I really invite you to join us. We have quite a wonderful roster of participants. The project that Kate and I have been working on is really thinking about architecture within its current context of an ecological emergency, a conversation we think Los Angeles could have more of. We were invited to contribute the exhibition at Craft Contemporary along the question of materials, but of course, when you're thinking about materials, you inevitably are thinking about the things in which materials produce, which is its architecture. So we thought about the different ways we could augment a conversation of architecture in Los Angeles through ideas of materials. A central focus of that conversation has been thinking about materials not as products, but as processes. and really centering on the idea of materials as a verb or as a chain of operations that undergoes multiple transformations and moves across many sites. So tomorrow's conversation is organized with a keynote from Charlotte Melter-Bart's Rethinking Materiality. Her work is focused on the histories of extraction architecture and thinking about the different ways we can respond by perhaps not building. We're followed by a panel on sourcing, including Anupama Kundoo, Meredith Miller. Meredith is here too. Sorry, I didn't introduce you. Meredith Miller and Katie McDonald, thinking about the origins or provenance of materials before they become our buildings. We're followed by a presentation by Atelier Luma, who will have to join us online, which is a remarkable institution and design studio in France, whose own building site was constructed utilizing materials sourced within 50 kilometers of the studio. And then we will close out the symposium with a panel including Matthias Kohler, Christine Yogeman, and Ben Loescher, thinking about materials within its own social systems and organizations. So a fundamental question we're trying to ask in Los Angeles is, what are the conditions of possibility for certain practices, both here and globally, to respond to the incredible degradation of our environment today? So that was a lot, but I do hope to see some of you tomorrow. And of course, the book launch today at 6:30. I am so pleased to kick off the symposium events with Anupama's lecture. And we're so thrilled to be doing this with USC Architecture. Anupama Kundoo, an introduction. You'll see through her lecture, her thinking around her projects and practices are incredible and widely recognized. So Anupama graduated from the University of Mumbai in 1989 and received her PhD in TU Berlin in 2008. Her research-oriented practice started in 1990 in Oroville, has generated people-centric architecture based on social and material research for low environmental impact, while being socio-economically beneficial. Her body of work was recently exhibited as a solo show, Taking Time, at Louisiana Museum of Modern Art, Denmark. Anupama Kundoo has received the Reba Charles Jenks Award for her contribution to architectural theory, the 2021 August Prize for Architectural Technology, the 2021 Building Sense Now Global Award of the German Sustainable Building Council, and the Global Award for Sustainable Architecture under UNESCO patronage in 2022. Her studios are based in Berlin, Germany, and Mumbai and Pondicherry in India. Kundoo's rigorous research and experimentation in new materiality for architecture is the result of questioning basic assertions, construction habits that humanity has adopted during the long process of industrialization. Rather than focus on shortage, she sought abundance through investing in human resources and human resourcefulness, such as ingenuity, time, skills, care, and sense of community. She's currently professor of architecture at TU Berlin and Norman Foster, visiting professor at Yale University. Anupama, will you join us, and I'll hand this off to you. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to USC and to Craft Company for having me here and bringing me all the way to be able to meet the others who are working in the same kind of direction. Looking forward to exchanges after this. I just want to add that I not only I'm actually a practitioner who has accidentally landed up as a professor, but I began my practice many years ago. I didn't expect that such an experimental practice would become relevant to other people than myself. So I began in very, when I was young and naive, and a lot of things you see has to do with the fact that one didn't have the conditioning of fear and what the others are doing, and now I'm so glad that not only for the things that I did, but for the very many things that I said no to. So my practice is very much also about the projects that I didn't build, that I cannot show because they don't exist. I just want to talk about the rethinking of materiality that I want to talk about was actually already described very well by you just now, about not talking about materials in our times as if they were inert things with their own properties, polarizing concrete versus mud and creating a rhetoric about which are the bad materials, as if there are moralities for the poor materials who are just finding themselves in different parts of the earth with different properties. So for me, always the material research that I always did, they fell into people's research definitions of materials, but for me, they were human. The research was driven by the human resourcefulness, actually, throughout. It was about understanding human ingenuity and sheep behavior when they are not sheep, of just following various trends, and then the trends, because of globalization, those trends are getting global and people are increasingly losing a sense of common sense and acting like victims in the front of all those various trends. By the way, I just want to say for all the young people here that 35 years ago when I graduated, it looked exactly the same as if sustainability was a new problem and something. When I look up each decade that passed, the problem didn't seem to have decreased at all. We are saying the same things. We're literally saying the same things. But each year, we are consuming more and more. It's something, really, I was interested in walking the talk because the same person who was a victim of habits and doing some other research elsewhere, this gap was difficult for me. And therefore, I took on a personal journey immediately after graduating, and then that led to this kind of practice. What I want to say is that I always felt already then we know about these problems already, so natural resources, we've been always complaining that they're running out. They're not saying that we are making them run out. We keep acting like by itself things are happening, that environmental problems are happening. It's ourselves are not put inside those sentences. Actually, I saw the problem because I was young. I saw it very, very simple. And the solution as well, somehow. I just didn't feel like the world is ending and now, I wasn't driven by the fear. I was driven by the excitement and the challenge to be less stupid or to be more ingenious. And I was also quite excited that because we were considered a poor country, etc., so I felt that we don't have the luxury to waste. We had to be clever to survive. So that also gave me some, real reasons to try to build things with even less resources than our forefathers did. But not thinking about panicking, now I have to give up this and that. My approach, and it still is that way, I'm not driven by the fear that things are running out. I'm more worried about living stupidly. Literally, I'm telling you, my whole excitement for what we are capable of, what the humans deserve, how intelligent, the fact that humans are evolving. So why are we regressing in some areas? That was my question. So that's also the driver. And therefore, it was much more about understanding that while natural resources are finite, human resources are infinite. The materials are being moved around since centuries, even before humans, due to gravity and climate. They find different expressions. All animals and humans, we find a way to continue that. The materials are molecules that are reconfigured all the time. But what is happening to the human in the middle of all that? And after spending all the resources, especially during the industrial times, the last 100 years, are we more satisfied? Are we, after spending all of those things, are we liking what we made? Do we like being in them? Those were my questions, and those are still my questions. And I feel that the human resourcefulness, which has been undermined during the industrial age, is something that I feel sorry for, And my work is much more about celebrating these, taking time as one of the most underrated resources that humans have, and our capacity to think, to be clever, to come up with more and more ideas, to imagine, to adapt, to experiment, all of these things, and to be optimistic. This is what I'm focusing on. In a short summary, I used to ask myself, talking about materials, how did we get from here to here? I grew up in India, and just within a couple of 100 years, where materials were always local. Regarding food, I'm talking about all materials. Food, clothes, anything that humans did, the luxury was defined, or architecture, let's say, architecture and culture was defined as how you cultivated your eyes, how you cultivated your hand, how you were cultivated as a person, and you were able to use whatever was lying around and give it so much meaning, make it so beautiful that the way you spent your time with it, you left behind something priceless for the future generations. You never looked upon old things, they were always considered heritage and luxury. A one sari that we wear could take months to weave, but the grandmother's sari was still being passed down, because the way humans managed to look at clothing or anything they made, whatever they made, was considered to be the luxury. If you had to do a simple thing with the same rice, you make a simple meal. And if it's a big wedding, you do a biryani and spend a whole day doing it. You didn't have to think it is more luxurious if I import ingredients from far away. Same with architecture. You see very simple expressions of stone and you see very, very refined work. And all that we all actually know this, even here now, that architecture will outlive us. Whatever we create will be given, it's even more expensive to undo them than to use them. So when we keep on having such high building costs, and in countries where the population is not increasing, and yet the buildings are increasing, you ask yourself, what the hell is going on? Like, why are we, where is really the problem? Everybody, like all the rich countries in which I lived, they are talking about housing and affordability just as much as we used to do. We know that there's migration and so on. But what about, to what extent is what we are producing and the way we are producing it the problem? Or the fact that it's not relevant and that it's going to leave behind even buildings that are 10 years old and the large glass windows that they have without any mullions, just so that it looks more modern. They can be easily broken due to a child who ran into it, and now you cannot easily replace it. You need 200 pieces to be able to afford to replace that one thing. So that has very much to do with our values. Is architecture really, is the expense, is it really the material, or is it not the void and the design of the void that always was what architecture is about? We used to say that the function of the pot lies in its nothingness. And the space is actually free. Only the materials, mold, everything we use is the part we didn't build. And that's what we occupy. And does that not need the maximum attention to create those kind of soothing spaces, to know about proportions, to define the right porosities that allow outside air to enter, and so on. So from immediately using your materials to a situation where worldwide, where housing is offered, you see in the background, this is Mumbai today. You find the same kind of apartments that you probably find in Hong Kong, or I don't know, you can name any city, Frankfurt, and all the steel glass buildings, the office buildings, they even not only are produced by the same architecture chains, and large supply chains, but all the materials and all of the actual architecting is kind of given away to and architects are passive, and the designing is given, is being done by those who are designing and marketing those material catalogs, and architects innocently assembling those things like a child who plays with Lego, but thinks he designed that thing. That's how I used to think when I came to the West, like, even we didn't play with Lego when we grew up. We didn't have Lego. But also I noticed that the Lego, people who played growing up on Lego, they also got random pieces and they made freer things with it. Now they get that one car with one doll with a pink thing, and they have to exactly make that, and they think they made it. They think they designed that. And I don't think that architects are too different. They're also doing a adult version of Lego perhaps on some level, because people, why are all these buildings looking like that? And we are going on complaining as if someone did that to us. I mean, there's something I don't really understand. But anyway, I know that kind of product, which is becoming universal now for housing all over the world, with every year the standard, what we're defining as the minimum standard, is going up. In Germany, we are supposed to have double glazing. We're not supposed to more and more open our windows. Everything has to be automated. Whatever regulations are being produced are further financing that kind of direction rather than live with the local climate and so on. So now I don't really, honestly, we don't know which one is uglier. Because in one scenario, you are oppressed by the lack of money. In the other scenario, you became poor because all your money went to the bank for that thing which you don't like. And you don't even know which one is yours. And you don't know, I mean, really, the fact that all the rest is called informal development, and the so-called informal development in many countries, not just in India, is actually more. We have more than 50%. Officially, since one decade, more than 50% are informal. So what is formal? And why are we selling a standard? Of course, if you live outside of your means, I don't mean only in money terms, water, energy, and everything. The problem is to live outside of your means. Like whatever you earn and you decide to eat out every day, every parent will tell you, you're going to land up in that spot. You'll be not necessarily eating what is healthy, that you like, but you just don't know how to cook. I mean, then you're putting up with, and you think that to learn to cook, how impossible, how could I make my coffee? Now you only know the large chains, It's a lifestyle thing. So that's how I see this problem. And I see another problem where, when it comes to materials, I also wonder why age-old materials, let's say bricks, let's just take bricks because it's literally the oldest manufactured material. Before humans used natural materials as they found them, stone, earth, ice, whatever they found, they built architecture out of it. Brick is the first manufactured material, 3,800 years old, and it still remains a brick after many, many years, But this brick, which has built in the past all kinds of fascinating long span structures, if you look at Notre Dame or you look at, the Guastavino staircase and whatnot, you look at taller, early tall buildings, you wonder why everywhere these materials are allowed to carry less and less load. Now they're only allowed to be infills in 3-meter walls. Everywhere, even when I lived in Australia, I noticed that people were saying, no, you can't do brickwork, you can only do brick veneer. And everybody's underutilizing the qualities of any material. Most of the materials that you see are facades on top of high energy materials for all kinds of justifications, habits, and so on. But this is the one reason why when I graduated and I thought I should rather not work in the offices that were, I was just out of idealism and a bit of naivety. I had started my own practice. And I thought that even it was just, I was very happy only if would be able to meet my bills. That's all. I didn't expect much. I didn't want to do a kind of architecture that I didn't believe in. And I just thought I could delay that decision for one more month, one more week, or whatever it is. But in the meantime, I managed to create my practice, and I just want to say to everyone here, I did think in those days too that human resources were the most important resources, and even when I didn't have money, I used to feel that I'm alive, so I have the resources. And I am the resource. What I'm going to make, like if I hang around somewhere for a few days, I'll make something, then there's a sweater. If I have no job to do, I'll do things, I really believed in that, and most of all, I believed in my saving my own time for what is worthy. And I think through that thinking, I managed to realize that I didn't buy the slogan that time is money. I felt growing up in India that something is wrong with this slogan, and that we must save human time, basically cut back on human engagement to make way for the machines. And I'm not against machines and AI or whatever, I'm not against anything. I do feel, I enjoy making things. I believe what you make makes you. I believe that intelligence is an embodied thing. It's not only in the brain with the computer. There are things you discover when you're involved in making them, and that's very much a part of my process. So my department in Berlin that I'm heading as a professor is called Making Matters. I want to put the attention not only on the material, but on the way you make it, starting from sourcing to every other aspect. So I want the whole human engagement with the material to come in the forefront so that we get out of victimhood and feel more empowered through knowledge and through building knowledge and building community, while building architecture, while building buildings, we will understand what is going on and connect with it. So I basically was rejecting that kind of efficiency argument that, time is money, be more efficient, don't spend more, we were told, like the developed countries, they spend less on human labor and more on materials. Spend more on materials, whereas in India, we were spending more on materials and less on weight. Opposite. Spending more on labor and more on materials. Of course, we underpaid the craftsmen often, so there was an exploitation aspect to it. But also, in general, that was the motto being sold to us. And I used to believe that what is the point of doing efficiently things that need not be done at all? And there are many, many areas of such redundancies that I felt like after spending all this money, building all these things and not liking what you have, constantly buying clothes that are not fitting you because you can only choose from S, M, L. All of it is wrong. Whose body fits in any of those? Are we only 3 sizes? So I used to criticize, look at what has happened. I used to joke about this, that how can we accept that how foolish or how oversimplified to imagine that there are 3 sizes in which everyone should fit. And by the way, those who are S, they don't fit uniformly S. Nobody's like that. Very rare people. And instead, people start feeling something is wrong with their bodies. They really feel that they have to fix the body and not the dress. It's something really, really, I grew up in a way that I didn't have to confront all of those. So through that, I realized, no, we have to reject what is not working. So modularizing is good, but over-standardizing leads to a lot of waste, because every piece of wood you buy is either 1 meter or then it's 2 meters. What happens to all that rest? And to think that all paper has to be A4, everything has to be what the machine designer, now I have to buy that printer because no one's making another print. So we are buying those gadgets and we are confining. I think as musicians have said before, that we are prisoners of our own device. And it's clearly evident. But I think that's not acceptable for architects, because we are the visionaries. If we are feeling like impotent, then at least then it's really something to think about. So the way I started the practice is by looking at traveling in rural India, looking at the beginning, because every question I questioned assumptions, I would go one step back and another step back, and it took me all the way to the sourcing. And what I really learned is what I'm going to share with you. I realized that the making of materials, say bricks, how they are made industrially and how they were made before is completely different. It also has a completely different impact. Yet, in all the green rating systems, we have only brick and so many kilojoules. It's not true. I mean, in Hoffman kilns and in all of these industrial kilns, I discovered, because I did the math, I discovered that the bricks that are fired in ovens, they lose about 40% of the energy in the kiln wall, each firing. 980 degrees are required, and then half of it goes into the kiln wall, each firing. Whereas in ancient manufacturing processes, they would build these on fields, and it's still being produced like this in Africa and India, that you have bricks on the field. Therefore, they are slightly crooked. It's not that they don't know how to do it straight. Just using no infrastructure but the bare field as a floor on which you lay your brick, you get this undulated, imperfect surface. But look at the cost benefit value, and the bricks that are on the outside, they are the brick pile is the oven. You put a mud plaster, fire everything. When you finish firing, sorry, bear with me, I'm going into so much detail because I believe that's where the clues lie. So when you finish firing, you find that the bricks on the outer side edges are less fired, and that's not a problem, because in which building do all bricks need to be the exact same strength? The outer ones need to be waterproof, the inner ones don't need to be. Then there are all kinds of things you need brick for, the interiors and so on. So earlier, we used to have a very elaborate system after firing to classify the brick grade 1, 2, 3, and accordingly they were priced. And when the bricks were sold, the field was back to being a field. The guys who were working in the brick factory didn't have to work oppressively for 8 hours in some factory. They were creating plantations whose thinnings they were taking out for as fuel, but they were also farmers. They're also growing rice on the side, and there are moments where, the economy was coming from a diverse set of things. The territorial consequence of material sourcing and the socio-economic one of people belonging to a region and doing what is needed to care and nurture all the various interdependencies of all the various materials that go into making that new manufactured material. So I started understanding how it was like a new education for me too, when I dug deeper and I realized each of the things that people need are all handled by themselves and by the territory, including the mortar, the lime mortar, that was also produced. Like Portland cement gives you a very basic thing. It's like a Maggi noodle compared to a homemade pasta. You just know what you have to do. So if you don't want to know your engineering, basically, I know why a lot of engineers would prefer you to handle the ready-made one, because otherwise you need to know a lot of local situation, which we prefer to standardize so that nobody is responsible or some strange thing happening there. But that's where I realized the problem lies. And I realized that in India, for example, most of the materials, no matter what, this is limestone, for example, there are entire communities who live in those regions and have been doing that work for centuries. Now, I'm not saying they should remain doing that, but I mean, one thing is losing the knowledge, another is how to help them transition and how to let the knowledge remain. Even if we make these things in new ways, we are throwing the baby with the bathwater when we are wiping all of this out, and then we don't even know anymore. So a lot of people knew a lot of things, and not a few people know a lot of know few things very well, but they don't know what they don't know. And there are a lot of other people who have to just accept to follow the instruction of the guys on the top. So when I started producing architecture with literally materials lying on the ground, I was given a whole lot of discouraging sentences all the time, and I'm so glad I survived them. Most of the discouraging things actually did not come from the client, but it came from the engineers. They used to say, this cannot be done. After a few years, I dared a bit more. I used to ask them, can it generally not be done or can it not be done by you? And now, if they still ask me those things, I prefer to change the engineer rather than the design. Because I realize, yeah, have you considered changing the engineer? And it's not easy. It's really not easy when you're young because it requires them to think, and the insurances are set up in a certain way, and so many other things are set up for us to not be human but to be sheep. They are literally set up. And I wanted to work on that non-sheepification thing, not just on the architectural knowledge. And I realized that if you actually do those things, like they tell you this is more expensive, that, and there are all these mantras that whatever you do new will be more expensive. And actually, if you do the math and find out that sometimes they are more expensive and sometimes they are not. It's really literally not more expensive. If I eat the mango from my own tree, it cannot be more expensive. But even that, exactly in the case of the mango, also we are told that it's much cheaper to send all the cashews and the mangoes, and then it goes somewhere, and then we have to eat it. Like it's true that it's cheaper when I eat it in Germany for some reason, from Aldi and these kind of guys. So, but the thing is, I realize that today I know the answers to that is because we are not paying the real costs. And if now we will start paying the real costs, or we will come back to the basics of certain common sense. So it was not easy to do these kind of buildings initially, but the more I did that and just did extra work to convince myself that I was not stubborn, I really wanted to go beyond the dogmas and the mantras and find out what makes sense to be doing. And I found out the same happens with every other material. So when I came to Auroville, a small place in South India, where I had moved, where there was a laboratory city coming up, and I felt I must think of the large material question behind all of this, and I started embarking on this journey. I started looking at granite quarries and quarry mining with machines of different scales versus the hand mining, which is still going on, by the way, in many places. And where, again, human ingenuity at work. Just one guy taking slabs out. If you watch carefully, what they do is they make a hole, and with a little tool, they know that granite is going to split because of its nature. So those things were used by us. And even the way they were rolled and carried and so on, it looked, the people who worked with such heavy material didn't look like muscle men, or there was a lot of knowledge behind it. And I started realizing how even the sound didn't have that thing of the machine world, where now they have to completely, it's bad for their health. Many of them go deaf in these kind of factories, It's a health hazard. Whereas in this kind of quiet, so what I'm starting to today understand about materials and our making culture is the fact that the human scale is gone out of whack. I mean, it's all being designed like the mobility in the city, all for the convenience of the various machines and not the human scale, because the machines let us go to all kinds of, the language and the infrastructure and the scale of what the machine needs to operate is way out of our scale. And because of that, we don't know where to do what anymore, I think. And again, these were just observations. And in my early projects, I started applying the existing skills and showing them off. And like these are hand dressed granites. For a very temporary exhibition, I found out that if you actually, like, they are all resting like arches on dry granite chips, just like our old corbelled, like what, not corbelled, what is this, the paving, that the stone paving you have, all these surfaces, they are also not actually cast in cement or, they are loose in sand. And so many things that I rely on engineering, but given the building upon the culture and knowledge that existed, and I produced quite competitive, like very cost competitive things that looked very luxurious, but actually were much more affordable. But it didn't look, it looked rich because the kind of workmanship that was given, the kind of attention and time that was given, but the time that we gave was not, didn't come out of an extra budget. It came, by saving all the importing of materials from far away and just literally taking what is around you. And as I kept on living in this very simple place where I thought there's no materials here, there was no shop, there's nowhere to buy hardware. And you, like most of rural India, and you realize that actually if you look closely and you train your eye, every material is a material. Whatever's under you, you dig a little deeper, even wood and trees and everything, rope, everything is from materials that come from the earth. If they are alive or they are not alive. And they either need processes or they can be used directly. So I went into those questions and I confronted, when I noticed that there's a potters community who were able to, I started deflecting their skills into making roofing systems, because I found that their livelihood was threatened due to urbanization. So I wanted to come up with more and more methods to divert these skills that are existing so that the guys who are going jobless due to all these transitions can actually be guaranteed more employment. And through that, we can create more knowledge and use the modern skills to use far less materials than the ancestors did. So the previously used terracotta tiles were not insulated. They needed a lot of substructure, a lot of wood, and all of that was in short supply. So I tried to find a way to use these things and create a sense of local community building local buildings, thinking that the buildings are going to grow because urbanization is rapid. So this is actually my own house, so I could take more risks. But as you see that most of it was again to celebrate the skills and be proud of what people, not to plaster those surfaces, but to show that that architecture was anchored in that place, not only through the material that was found, but through the way it was made as well, through the people who left their fingerprint somehow on it and were able to relate to it too. So those who are engineers or, art historians and architectural, like curators, they will know that this is not vernacular, but the masses were calling my work vernacular architecture. I used to get a bit irritated, honestly, because I was saying like, this is not how people build, there. And then I also realized that whenever something looks brown and all that, it looks vernacular. Have you noticed, like anything that looks earth plaster or whatever, even if it's with cement in it, it's just a little bit brown, red, and people say this is vernacular. A few of them are more generous and they were saying contemporary vernacular. So that's what I noticed, because they said, oh yeah, these are some Indians, all brown guys in the side doing very brown things. And so I do want that to be taken up at some point, that, like they don't say that to the chefs. They don't tell the chef that you've made with local produce, so it's a traditional meal. Nobody says it. They are still considered chef if they use locally sourced products, but for architecture, it's still there. So this is an image of myself in the very first year of my practice. Where I look now at these kind of pictures and I see more in it. I thought there was nothing here. I just saw these potters and some earth. And I saw that others were importing and building materials there in a similar way. But I realized that what I see in the picture is the potential. Because there are people and they know they do everything with what is around them. So the potential, even the place looked arid, but they were living off that food. They were eating millets and, so luckily because those big department stores, etc., hadn't come there, they kept eating from the land, whatever they grew. And it was different. So I was able to, as a Bombay girl, I was able to come as an urban person. I was able to come and realize that I'm the one who should adapt because there is a lot of wealth here. So, but when I manufactured this kind of units for those pots, I tried to put in the same methods and processes like I found with brick. So I didn't just get it made in factories. I tried to fire them with coconut shells and alongside their rice field wherever they worked, so that they didn't have to go to a factory somewhere for 8 hours and then we have to pay for all that infrastructure. So I tried to bring those kind of known processes and rely on local masons. As much as I didn't get supported by the engineers, I did get really enthusiastically received by masons and so on, who are very excited to try new things. I think this kind of skepticism comes from the indoctrination through education, but those who are not educated, they don't have that problem. They are very happy to progress and try out new things. So with their help, I was able to, take on quite a lot of projects, even though this is my own house. The first building that I built with this was for a Frenchman, and in fact, because I was new, he always reminded me that he's doing me a favor by letting me work. But it happens, that because it's true. I was new to the field, but I used to just tell him, okay, whatever you want to change, but don't change this roofing system. So I used to take, let me do one thing. So I used to take one by one things onto the next project and not put all the risky eggs in one basket. And with the help of craftsmen, like these bricks are also local bricks. I have used them in an exposed way in a monsoon area. And I thought if I'm just going to do it in my own house, these are the so-called bad bricks, the non-industrial bad bricks, because I realized that I want to celebrate the discovery that these weak, bad bricks are the good bricks in our times, if you measure it properly. And let's work with the bond and let's work around it to make it look good enough to be exposed. So, but what I mean by building knowledge and building community is that this experience and confidence with a lot of people coming on board doing this allows you to, your imagination comes up with more things like, this is the traditional cooking pot which I used to see them trying to sell. But about 8 or 10 years into these type of buildings, I suddenly had an idea how to use even that as is. And I decided to use them as formwork for like waffle slab kind of efficient ceilings, where I could reduce the steel by 50 to 60%. Like normally you would have every 10 centimeters, you would have 1 or 2 bars of steel, but here you have them every 45 centimeters, for example, and you don't have to demold and you don't have to have this expensive metal formwork, etc. So I started using, this was a test here, but there were other projects of much bigger spans for which I had done this research. So in my own house, actually it was a laboratory because I had many projects by then. It was 10 years into my practice and I had a whole lot of big span structures, and I was thinking, where do you need insulation? Where do you need, where you need to use the ceiling? It cannot be a bolt. So we have to come up with other systems. So I came up in my wall house. I had about 7 roofing systems tried out to be applied on other public building projects I had around that area. So, and also while in all of these projects, I was also reworking everything from green building infrastructure, always reducing to the max. Like I say, reduce to the max, not to the minimum, because it maximizes actually the thing you created by cutting out redundancies. So there was a lot of climatic passive design principles in here, reducing the need for energy. I mean, the house was run on renewables, but also that was, in order to do that, I had to cut a lot of, I didn't have to do what a lot of buildings around there did, that you first build with concrete, then you heat your building, and then you have to cool it. So you directly try to ventilate it, have 3 or 4 types of windows, this shutter for the monsoon, another for, so it required a lot of complex thinking, but I tried to produce an architecture where all this complexity doesn't look like a burden for the user, that they don't have to know how much we thought, like they don't have to deal with that very technological product, but something very easy because it has a synthesis of all of the different problems through the one solution. So, but 10 years prior to that, when I had moved to Auroville from Bombay, I actually, this is the thing, a kind of hut I had built for myself in Auroville. It was entirely built with round wood. I mean, definitely in those days, the bike, the motorbike, and the solar panel were the most expensive part of the life there. Because the actual, this is not something really new. I have, of course, designed, I also believe that the design of the void, the proportion, the details is what gives the architecture, it makes it look like architecture than just a building. But many people live like that, actually. People, there were many huts of this sort already in Auroville that were being used, tied. Casuarina wood is the one that people grow for scaffolding, and also whose thinnings were used in those fire rings I showed you before. It's a plantation through which these things come in. But it was only, I had designed the house with this kind of very simple forms also, so that you don't need walls, that the roof goes up to the edge of the pillar. Again, these are not something really innovative. It was more like fixing the proportions and so on. It's something that I saw a lot of people living like this, with these kind of materials. But I did it mostly for the cost reason, and at that time in my life where I was looking for the meaning of life and all of those things, when you feel like all you need is less, so you wanted to experience that instead of being a wage slave and needing to have a high lifestyle, if you also really experiment on what your true needs are, and you require, I wanted to just liberate my time to think, and to not have routine jobs and so on, and live very simply and need less. And then but what I realized, although this was mainly built due to cost reasons, and it did liberate my time. I took a lot of time to think and to live, and a lot of things I do are the result of having lived here for the first 10 years. And what I did learn here though, which I only discovered by, living here and staring at the roof, is that one of the, talking about time as a resource, is like if you were to use a rectangle section instead of a round wood, for the same section, you probably need 25 more years or something for that piece of wood to grow so big that you will cut a rectangle out of it. And the rectangle profile will be weaker because it's not the whole, the grains are broken. But all of these reflections came later to me. It was not something that I set out to address. I realized that, again, there are places where, why did we start making timber instead of using round wood? It's because if you have to make hundreds and thousands of something, it's easier for people to replicate a design. Again, it comes down to industrial, so-called efficiencies. But that efficiency comes at the cost of needing a tree to be much bigger so that you can cut these smaller, there's a lot of wastage. And you need, if you realistically want to grow trees, you need probably to consider using round wood. It's much more efficient in many ways. And also, a lot of the industrial designed timber houses are not actually used for those thousands and millions of applications. Many houses are done just for one house, and the architects anyway design details for that one house. So that's what I realized, that there's so much potential even in vernacular technologies to be optimized, and not to be just saying that, okay, here's industrialization, everything before it is called traditional and everything thereafter is modern, because actually even tradition used to continue to evolve. It was not set in a particular year after which it is no more traditional. So the optimization of it need not have stopped. So then I started doing larger projects with the same attitude, public buildings, co-housing, and public buildings like hostels and town halls and institutional buildings, etc. And I started continuing to apply these principles alongside how we were managing water, wastewater, and reuse, direct reuse of wastewater for irrigation, etc. And renewables, and all that became part of the larger thinking. But even here, I started looking at technology and how technologies the technology is very important. What I decided quite pretty much in the beginning of a project which technologies make sense to use, how to negotiate between handmade and machine-made, because a lot of technologies are what are alienating for the local people. I'm not even talking about people who can bring in sweat equity by participating in their construction of their own houses. I'm talking about also local masons, etc. You have firms coming in from far away, taking the construction contract. And nowadays, when we do competitions, we want to prove how big is the turnover, how big is the construction company, and we are exactly encouraging the opposite than the local opportunity. So a lot of people in my projects, I try to build like this. For example, the earth walls, rammed earth, were built because we had to do a wastewater treatment plant. The earth that we had to dig out turns out to be good for building, but we didn't build everything with earth. We built those things that had to be spent. But these type of things, if it was a construction company from elsewhere making everything high tech, then the people there would not, even local masons would have not got jobs. So, leave alone the people who are going to live here and who have no other bank money with which they can take a bank loan, even though they do have jobs to pay it off with. So I realized that in order for people's participation to be a reality, there is a lot to be done, and in co-housing as well, where increasingly people don't belong to the common structure of okay, yeah, that's good. So for the people who are actually living here, and more and more singles are, occupying housing. I think there's so much of duplication there also with the kitchens and so on. So instead of, I'm also creating loneliness in the city. So I think co-housing and shared economy in the way housing is managed is a really an area of huge potential. And with those kind of ideas, we have, sort of widened our way of thinking about economy or the cost of a project. Now I'm going to just mention the project that has been included in the Crafts Contemporary exhibition. We were not able to bring in all the samples, unfortunately, but I'll show you some pictures. This is probably the most radical of my experiments. So it is, I have to mention, especially being in California, the brain behind this kind of thinking of baking earth houses in situ is a Californian ceramist called Ray Meeker, who had got inspired. He's very good at kiln technology. He has even produced some of my early prototypes of those cones and other materials. He's even a mentor of sorts, I would say, because I've been fascinated by his his own work and knowledge. He lives in South India and he had addressed the capacity for bricks to be fired in situ, building upon the experiments of Nader Khalili, who had actually accidentally discovered that earth buildings that were had faced fire in buildings had started to become like cooked on the inside. So he had got this idea and he did a couple of buildings in long. I don't think Ray Meeker also didn't think that his buildings may be necessarily cooked through, and we would never know because in that region where he practiced, there's hardly any rain and it's not the biggest challenge. Whereas we are in the monsoon area, and Ray Meeker didn't want to fire those houses lavishly like Nader Khalili did because their fuel was not a concern for him at that point. It was just the fact that it could be done and the romantic idea of earth, water, fire, etc. coming together. So here, what happened is Ray had done a series of buildings where he felt that if the bricks that, like the Indian potters make bricks on the field, not wasting the energy that goes into the kiln, if it would go into a house, if the house is a kiln temporarily, and other materials which are stuffed inside could take up the cost of the project then of the fuel, then you would be getting a mud house for the cost of a brick house for the cost of a mud house. And that was his journey. And I had also built 3 projects in that method. Later, I did my PhD because I was in Berlin teaching and I wanted to take up the open questions. So I did another project called Homes for Homeless Children. This involves, in principle, mud bricks are placed. You have to build like domes, vaults, and whatever compressive structures because it has to take its own weight. It's a monomaterial. There's mud brick and mud mortar, and that's the beauty that I like, that you don't even need cement. So down you see flue holes and fireboxes, etc. Because now what you're building is a house, a room, but it has to also function as a kiln. So we have to solve those things, and you start it with materials in a manner that you can allow combustion and air to come in, etc. Then you insulate it like the old brick kilns and leave it cooking for 3 to 4 days. And then you watch the fascinating phenomenon of vitrification where the earth is being converted and being made waterproof. And then you let it cool for a few days and you take out all the products with which you can finish the house or sell it. What you can do in my project, I have done handmade brick size bricks from the earlier time, not from whatever I experienced from the pre-industrial bricks. I did products like that, but Ray has managed to make all kinds of things. He sees a great potential in looking at the house as a generator of building materials, not as a spender of, not a consumer of building material, but as a generator of local materials, including tiles, wash basins, all of these pipes and all kinds of ceramic, all sorts of things going to. Ceramics are very part of architecture, and we have this amazing infinite number of things we can produce. And later, when the house is completed, you can, do waterproofing with, I in this case used other tiles, broken tiles from other projects to complete the project to keep the spirit. So these are homes for homeless children, very low budget or no budget project that we had. But the idea in this case was to test the findings of the PhD and to find out some of the scientific questions. I'm going to quickly show you, because I'm running out of time. I actually spoke too much of the background, but I'm going to just show you. I talked about the potential of vernacular materials and building methods to be optimized further. The way age-old timeless materials could be used in new ways through new engineering and through creating new knowledge and skills as required. But also, I want to touch upon what I'm doing with high energy materials. I think it is very important to not polarize this material debate about the bad guys and the good guys. I think it's a question of science and not wasting, this high embodied energy materials. They can be also reduced. What we do need to navigate climate change and waterproofing is a very important thing that cement allows. This is a research with ferrocement, a material that replaces large diameter steel bars with chicken mesh and very tiny amounts of steel distributed throughout, but also the section of the material is just an inch thick or less, not more than an inch. So as a result, in order to give it stability, you have to fold and bend and do folded plates and other engineering systems. I've been also researching other fibers like glass fiber, natural fiber, etc. It's something that is the longest research. It's been almost 25 years that I'm working with this material. But one of the outcomes here is what is called fulfill home. I mentioned Lego. So don't accuse me, but it's a kind of Lego version of, for post-disaster relief and for things like that. It's a versatile wall system in which your storage is included, but you can even infill column frame structures very quickly with functional bricks that are actually containers. To make, you can put these up in 1 or 2 days. These elements can be hand carried by 4 people, can be produced in the backyards of masons' homes. I continue to try to apply this kind of local production rather than big factories because a lot of costs are involved in just running factories and having that infrastructure. So I try to develop to bring down those costs and to bring housing back to the people, the production of housing back to the people and make the knowledge because it's kind of an easy, versatile material. Like you see here, the kitchen sink is included in that system. You can have all of this. You can make basically whatever you want due to the plasticity of ferrocement. So this is exhibited in Venice Biennale. On the right-hand side, there is a sanitation unit of a toilet and shower cubicle and wash basins. Some of my experimental work, like here, when I put up things in exhibitions, I've been using that budget to do load tests and so on because most of these projects don't have research funding. And we just managed to collaborate, like here in this case, with Mike Schleich, a very famous German engineer, who helped me to discover how ductile that material is through load tests, that they don't break, they bend because of the chicken mesh. So there are seismic properties. So, these are what the sanitation units look like. I have also used a lot of colors and this stucco-like finishes so that you don't have to apply finishes and, it's like reducing all the work that has to be done. And also in India, it's not easy to sell the idea that gray things are nice and nice looking. People won't, all their dilapidated structures look like that. So we need to put some color for the Indian palette. But for the non-prefabricated applications, I've also been testing things like origami crease patterns and systems or forms that are effective for form work, so that being such a light material, these Amazon cartons, etc., could be recycled. So paper could become the form work. You could fold it and carry it somewhere, just like the mesh, you could fold it and nothing is wasted in this triangular pattern because shells are very complex to produce, but these facets make them more easy to use an orthogonal strip by simply folding it. And then just, in 3 or 4 days, you can plaster that from either side. So this is really, really minimal. So this is just some of the work that I'm doing that is just like very much on the research, applied research that I'm still involved in. And in the Louisiana Museum of Modern Art, I have had 3 big rooms to share all of these experiments, where in the center you had a kind of cabinet of curiosities where you see all that nature has already built. Actually, all the engineering is almost already tried out by nature. Just climate and gravity has been navigated. So all these from life objects, from soap bubbles to all the forms that existed before humans existed, to the tools that humans made, which thereafter made architecture. Those type of things are collected there, and around it there were all these material palettes, and also one section where urban waste has also been. I mean, I think that since we are producing urban waste at a never before scale, I think all of these, whether they are books or whatever it is that we are producing, I think architecture has a potential to permanently trap or absorb any of those molecules that can make the background of what we are producing. So I have produced mostly pavilions and temporary structures. Like in Barcelona, for example, I have to do a pavilion, and I used the vacuum packing technology of ham and olives to use open books that have to be, thrown or pulped. Books are a big source of supply, sort of waste. So I have made it, I always look into the garbage first before I can build something. And so I just want to sort of end with this series of things that are temporary that I make, where, when it has to just be a couple of months, and then those support systems, they become something else. They are given to a school or another shade device, So building with and actually having fun with things that are being discarded by people, not only in the product, but also in the process of construction, so that wherever it's possible to not buy something, broken chai cups, etc., including them in the masonry and just absorbing them. Also using, helping students through encountering these kind of waste materials and trying out experiments in full scale, having these real confrontations to learn architecture, real materials, real scale, real people, and real places, to do 2 or 3 day workshops and produce, find a way to build with whatever is found, just to be able to experience that. I think I'm going to end with this. Yeah, that I feel it's very important to allow the thinking with the hands and not. I think if I would have only thought with my mind and with the computers as the only thing that I generate ideas from, I don't think a lot of the things that I have managed to do would have been possible. There are many things you have to do in the right scale. And there are many, our whole being is intelligent, not just if our intelligence is not only in the brain. I don't know where it is, but it's also in the hand. Thank you.
I know everybody has studios, but if anyone has questions, I'm happy to pass the mic. Thank you so much, Anupama.
Sorry, I know it was a bit long. I got carried away in the beginning part.
You were taking your time.
With your exhibition.
Yeah, taking time. You were performing it.
Sorry.
But anyone in the audience with questions? I think as people are ruminating, I really appreciated the ways in which your practice has been also building intimacy with the labor behind architecture and thinking about both the kinds of local knowledge that's possible in the context of Pondicherry or Mumbai. And I'm curious to know, as you work outwards, what that has been like for you to either be a visitor in a place in which you have to think through those labor conditions or labor knowledge, let's say, or hand knowledge, or if you, what it means to migrate that particular practice across different geographies.
I actually found that whatever I did and the way I had to do it has only empowered me to get along more easily with everybody everywhere in the world. Because I think that we are more common as humans. I think we are more common than different. I think Homo sapiens, I literally think so. I just found that that's why when I was talking to you also about building a model or whatever it is, because I realized that if you have a love for making, you know exactly what the others are making, anything it is, whether it's food or a model. They also have to go through that, and it's very connecting, And that's why you see musicians or people who do something with a material, they know the same thing. So I believe there is a common ground that is very easy. It has only empowered me to get along with people and have less resistance in all the steps that you have, especially in the developed countries. Because I have the knowledge and I can anticipate where things will be stuck, and I can tell them which test, like for example, most of the architecture projects at least in Germany, you do a concept and then you do the next and the next, and by the time you do your building costs, people make all fictional costs. They don't actually test a small prototype, and then they come back and say, oh no, we can't let you have this little experiment now, because that comes in stage 4. And I tell them, make that little mock-up, and I insist, and I try to have, when I finance that, I tell them, listen, it will significantly affect the budget. It will not give you a 10% escalation. You will know right now whether this or that and the detail. Why should you? Who said? I mean, Charles Eames and Ray had said that the details are the design. Why are they being kept for a stage 4 or a stage 6? So I am critical about the way the West has regulated practice, but because those who have to translate it, I understand them and they understand me, and I have less problems. Yeah.
Anyone else? Yes.
Hello. I just wanted to hear you go a little bit more in depth when you said design around the void. That was something you said that captured my mind. You said that you design around the void.
Yeah.
I just want to know a little bit more what you meant by that.
I mean, I think that architecture has a lot more to do with that, what we don't see but use, and the quality of that space, and less actually to do with materials. Like earliest architecture was about finding caves and finding opportunities that are useful. So I think that of late, especially, things have become Instagrammable and everything is about the rendering and the seduction of how a thing looks. But in our times, looks were not the only characteristic of good architecture. But I think because it's harder to measure the performance of those things that you don't see, like beauty. It's easier. So our society seems to measure a lot, excessively measure the performance of things that are tangible and easy to measure, and the ones that are super important but harder to measure are altogether left out of the equation. So I feel that the void, and the quality of the void, the space, the proportion, whether that has a texture or not, or the space, for example, that is more important than what is behind this plaster. Is it being made in stone, or so there's no need to be obsessed by the material. Any material that is lying around can lead to a perfectly good architecture, just like a good chef can cook with whatever's ingredients were there. That's what I meant.
Thank you.
I think we have like one more question, and then I know everyone's gotta go.
Yeah, so it talks about how when you were leaving and graduating school, the same problem existed around, sustainability and everything, and how it seems to exist in the same narrative. How do you view that shifting, like for the next decades, if at all? Thoughts on that? Or is it a pattern that we just continue to perpetuate?
I don't know how to imagine what others are going to do with their lives. And that's why I don't know where it's going to go. But I know that if I apply my own action, I see each human being as a very powerful bunch of capacities. And so it's like I don't believe in horoscope and all those things. I believe in the action. I believe in whatever circumstances you're going to be given, what is going to be your action and my action. And I do believe that it is the action and the consciousness with which we do it that will make the situation a little bit this way and that way, either for my collective, but first of all for me. So I think the problem was there. I think the problem is not being addressed because it's the sign of our times, and especially of the rich countries. They tend to feel like they are victims of their own construct. And I question this feeling. Why are they helpless? Why are they feeling helpless? It's something like creatures of habits, complaining all the time about how things are, but not literally doing anything about it, and being part of the problem and not knowing it. So I don't know if others will have the courage to live according in alignment to their own values. But I've seen that only one life. I thought of my work as growing up in Bombay as I was very much comfortable with my own irrelevance. I had known that there was little speck in the whole thing. But I'm surprised myself that in only 30 years, and in the first 10 years, there were 100 buildings or so that came out of my office. And not all of them are spectacular. But I am surprised how much of an impact and relevance people know me in other places, I'm teaching. I didn't plan to do any of this. So I think that if I didn't want to do any of this, my own single work has added up to quite something. And then I just imagine one more person and many more, and there are many doing it, but I think the problem is not the technology, knowledge or anything. I think it's just that sheep behavior, which I talked about. I just think we have to realize we are not sheep, we are humans. Life can be better.
Thank
You
you.
don't need to follow anybody.
Speaking about sheep behavior, I really appreciate how you reminded us of how we're all conditioned by regulatory systems like schedules. And I know a lot of students have class that have started in faculty. So I want to, no.
Because there was one more
Pushing
question
against
and
them.
we're running
Here
short.
they're not
Yes,
sheep, the
yes.
ones who didn't
I
leave are
want
not
to
sheep.
release those of us who choose to be sheep and want to. Maybe we'll wrap up this, and then if you do have a question, and I want to invite you up to the front here to ask. Maybe we can wrap this part of the Q&A.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thank you. Thank you.